We were afraid if people found out how straight we were, we'd ruin our reputation. I said, because we don't drink, we don't smoke. I said, we're like a bunch of choir boys, and that's the worst thing you can be in rock and roll.
This is Denny Somack, host of The Rock Podcast. I'm a producer, author, and rock historian, and I want to share with you some of the greatest stories in rock and roll.
And I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. John Lennon had this wise guy look on his face, just like me and my friends were just a bunch of wise guys, street kids.
Join me for The Rock Podcast, the only podcast that matters, from Podcast One or wherever you get yours.
It's episode 213 of the Cassius Morris Show. Thanks for tuning in to this brand new edition of the podcast. JJ French is my guest on today's episode of the show. Of course, the founding guitar player of one of the most inventive and unique rock groups out of the 80s, Twisted Sister. JJ has a brand new podcast available via Podcast One called the JJ French Connection, Beyond the Music. Make sure to go check it out wherever podcasts are available. That's Podcast One, Spotify, Apple. Huge shout out to Podcast One for facilitating this interview and, of course, for the fantastic content they continue to put out. If you like the podcast you're about to see with JJ French, please hit that subscribe button wherever you're currently tuned in, be it YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment or review. I definitely want to know what you think of the content that I've been putting out as of late. And of course, follow me on all social media at Cassius Morris and at Cassius Show. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I want to keep this introduction short and sweet. We have an hour of conversation with a fantastic rock historian and musician. So huge thanks to JJ again. I think you guys are really going to like this conversation. And without further ado, here it is. Enjoy.
Cassius Morris.
How are you?
I'm good, man. So you were named after Cassius Clay? Just curious.
I was, yes. And you can finally somebody who can say my name right. I figured more people should know about the legend.
Really? So what do they say? Cassius, not Cassius?
They do. And the only time I think it's okay is when they're from England, like Rob Halford. He can say my name however he wants, but others maybe not.
Well, I'm of that age, my friend. How old are you?
I'm 22.
Yeah, I kind of figured. I watched you do Steve Vai the other day. I watched the whole show.
Thank you. Wow.
Because I wanted to see you, hear you. There's so many people doing podcasts these days, and young people blow me away. They blow me away because I think because you haven't lived it, so you have to vicariously absorb your guest's vibe in order to reflect back on them, right? Because you're not living through their life. In fact, you're living through their biographies and their Wikipedia pages and your interest in your fandom, but not necessarily in your DNA. Is it fair to say that? Very
much so, actually, which is why this has been a very interesting experience just in general, going back into that time.
Were you surprised with Steve that he wanted to spend so much time on spirituality and not necessarily on music? Did you go in knowing that, or how did you process that?
I wasn't surprised because I checked out the videos he was doing, talking about it online, and he seemed like he really wanted to go into that, but he didn't feel like people wanted him to. And just from my personal perspective, I thought it was interesting. So I was like, let me help him bring that out, and in a way that it's not directly on his platform. So maybe he's more comfortable. And I thought it was, it really made an impact on me as a young man,
I thought you were, I do this all day long. I thought you handled yourself really well.
Thank you so much.
And you let him go, and you threw a couple of lines in, and he seemed to be liking you. And that matters a lot, because if someone likes you, then even if you are a little misdirected, they'll steer you correctly and not make you feel like an idiot. You know
totally.
What I mean?
They'll help you get to that place and reach those conclusions with them.
Yeah, and not go, what are you like? Didn't you check out on me enough? Are you not smart enough? Are you not this? I guess when you get to my age, you don't really give a fuck anymore.
That makes sense.
but to be honest, I do. I care. I like to have good people on my show. I like to interview good people. I like to have good conversations, and I don't run a gotcha podcast. I could, but I don't run a gotcha podcast. I say to my guests, you're here to push whatever you want to push. and you're allowing me to ask you the questions I want to ask. And then we go back and forth, and some of them, Don McLean was started off kind of tough. And then it turned out that we went to the same show together when we were kids. We went to the same first concert together. And the minute we established it, it altered the whole conversation.
It changed the whole vibe, right?
Everything. He was like, "Oh my God, you saw the Weavers at Carnegie Hall in 1963. Oh my God." And that changed. And then he became the fuzziest bear on the planet Earth, right? The greatest guy and the great conversationalist. But I think what happens is guys who do a lot of these things get bored with the same freaking questions.
Oh my gosh, they do. And I get bored asking them. So it's a fresh thing. Tell me, JJ, what's it like for you? And the podcast, by the way, the JJ French Connection Beyond the Music on Podcast One. What's it like for you interviewing fellow artists as someone who that is your DNA, that is your world? I mean, talk to me about that perspective.
If I'm a fan, I have to stop myself from being stupid. I mean, let me tell you this, Rob Halford, we are contemporaries. Okay. Right. We're the same age. We started our bands in the same year and we're contemporaries. I read the book. I knew that he was gay before he was willing to admit it. Cause like it was in the business, we toured with all the time. Right. Like nobody questioned it. Like no one even, who cares? Right.
No one cares.
No one's cared, but he thought everybody cared. This is the point. So I am talking to Rob and there was a couple of funny things about, first of all, Twisted Sister played 7 Judas Priest cover songs in the bars. So, So as a cover band, nothing speaks more to the respect you have of another band than covering their music.
Right.
So, we did AC/DC. This is back in the bars. We did AC/DC, Van Halen, Ozzy.
Before you reached success.
We did 7 Priest songs, right? So I told that to Rob. Also, Rob's manager, Jane Andrews, introduced me to my second wife 35 years ago. I mean, I know Jane, we're personal friends. And Twisted and Priest have been on multiple shows together, but we don't see each other. We fly in, we fly out. This comes in, we come out. But I said to Rob, you and I did meet once. And he goes, where? And I said, you had left Priest, and I had left Twisted, and you were in Sam Ash Music Store on 48th Street, and you were at the counter buying something. And a friend of mine said, hey, JJ, Rob Halford's over there. And I said, oh, cool. I never met him. So I walk up to him. I go, hey, Rob. JJ goes, hey, how you doing? I said, great. I said, what are you up to? He goes, I have a new band called Fight. And we talk a little bit, and he hands me a business card with his name on it that says Rob Halford, lead singer.
A business card.
A business card. And I look at this business card. I'm thinking, Rob Halford has a business card. And it says,
that's
Rob
sort of
Halford,
weird.
Lead singer, Fight. I'm thinking, if Rob Halford can have a business card, I can too. So I went out and got a business card. So I tell this to Rob. He starts laughing his ass off. He goes, you're so right. For about 6 months, I had a business card,
That's so odd.
It's so
but it's
random.
interesting.
Yeah. So from that, so that we bonded on that one. And the other side of it was, I said, Rob, in truth, you were afraid that if the world found out you were gay, it would hurt your band's career, right?
Yeah.
You were in fear. And that he writes about that. Did you get a chance to read the book?
I did. Yeah. Fantastic book.
Fantastic book. But he lays it all out, like from page 1.
I feel like I know the guy now.
You feel like you know him, right? So I said to Rob, isn't it ironic, Rob? You're afraid that people knew how if you were gay, you'd lose your following. I said, my band, we were totally straight, and we were afraid if people found out how straight we were, we'd ruin our reputation. I said, because we don't drink, we don't smoke. I said, we're like a bunch of choir boys, and that's the worst thing you can be in rock and roll. And our biggest fear was that anybody would find out that Twisted Sister doesn't party, because nothing will destroy our reputation more.
You got to do something, right? You're a rock band.
So I said, Rob, I said, and you know what? And it didn't matter either way. It didn't matter that we didn't party. It doesn't matter that you're gay. And he was a wonderful guest. He was great.
Yeah.
But we're peers, so that was kind of cool. So
what an incredible story though. I mean, the amount of things you've gotten to experience, as someone who grew up loving this music and then became a part of this music, it's just incredible. One thing I wanted to touch on with you is being, a Manhattanite from, New York your entire life. So many legendary musicians, obviously out of that region, but so much creative energy out of there, and a very unique creative energy. I'm just wondering, sort of, what does that mean to you to be from there? Because some people seem to take it on as sort of an identity, if that makes sense.
It is an identity to me. I am a born and raised kid from Manhattan, which means that, as I used to explain to my daughter, if living in New York City means nothing to you, in other words, if you can get around here, you don't care, like it's no big deal, then it's never going to be a big deal living anywhere. Right. I said, because we have a vibe and an energy in this city that's pretty amazing. So I grew up as a street guy. My book will tell the story, but you know what? Starting when I was 15, I was a drug dealer and a drug addict. And I went through that whole kind of hippie lifestyle from 67 to 72, the kind of stuff that you guys dream about, the kind of world that you and your generation go, what was it like to see Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin? I said, used to see him every weekend. It was no big deal. It was $3. You go to the Fillmore and you could see Zeppelin 4 times for $12. And if you couldn't afford the $12, you went to Central Park and they played for $1 at the Schaefer Festival. And Jimi Hendrix played for $1 at the Schaefer Festival, and then Zeppelin would go to Queens at the pavilion where the World's Fair grounds were, and they played, and that was $3. And I saw Zeppelin open for Iron Butterfly front row. I mean, I've had dinner with Robert Plant and Jimmy, and I've told them the story. The first time I saw Zepp, I was doing a drug deal, and I had no intention of seeing Zeppelin. I was just doing a drug deal. I had 5 pounds of pot in a shopping bag, and I was standing underneath the marquee at the Fillmore East waiting for some guy to buy the weed from me, and he didn't show up, and it was freezing cold. It was January 28th. Freezing freaking cold. And someone said, front row seat, and who was the headliner? Iron Butterfly. Wow. So do you know In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, right? Do you know that song?
Right.
Okay.
That group.
Well, yeah, that group. So I had seen Butterfly about 6 months prior, and I went, yeah, fuck that. I got 5 pounds of weed. Who cares? Like, how bad could it be? I got 5
how bad
pounds
could
of
it
weed.
be in New York City?
In New York City, I have 5 pounds of weed. So I go to the Fillmore front row, sit down, and because in those days, the promoter, Bill Graham, used to make crazy bills. Like, he would just put all different kinds of groups together.
All together.
So the opening act was a gospel group.
Oh, wow.
A Christian gospel group.
Before Zeppelin and Iron Butterfly.
Yeah, called Porter's Popular Preachers. Okay. And they sang gospel songs. Okay. So like, I love gospel. I mean, I'm an atheist, but I happen to love gospel music. I even wrote an article once. Can atheists love gospel? And the answer is yes, they can. I love gospel music. I will go to churches to hear gospel because usually the performers are the best performers on the planet. I love gospel. So I'm listening to Porter's Popular Preachers, and they're singing "If I Had a Hammer" and "We Shall Overcome." Whatever. Great. And I'm rolling all these joints, and Zeppelin comes on, and they play the whole first album, start to finish, and they do Moby Dick, and Bonham does his drum solo, and Jimmy Page is playing a Fender Telecaster through a couple of Rickenbacker amplifiers. I'll never forget this because when you're growing up seeing this, you don't tend to forget it.
Of course
you kind of you remember what you're seeing.
You remember.
And Iron Butterfly comes on, and they kind of suck, but it didn't matter because I got 5 pounds of weed, so I'm pretty roasted. Years later, I'm telling the story to Robert Plant. I said, man, I said, don't take this any disrespect. Well, we recorded one of our albums at Jimmy Page's house, so we got to know these guys. So I'm saying, don't take this offensively, but I didn't go to the show to see you guys. In fact, your album probably didn't come out for another month, and it didn't matter. I said, so I went in there, and you guys came out, and I said, and you were unbelievable. In fact, I remember Robert doing a song in which the whole band stopped playing, and he took the microphone away from his mouth and sang a verse into the audience.
Without a microphone.
No microphone.
Whoa.
But I'm front row, right? And I'm like, and meanwhile, I'm smoking so much dope that it looks like Chernobyl in the front row.
They're calling the fire department.
So I'm telling him the story, and he goes, "You're the guy with the weed?" And I go, "Yeah." I goes, "There was so much pot I couldn't sing."
My gosh.
I go, "That was me."
A young JJ puffing away.
That was me. So we had a laugh about that. And then they came back 6 months later when the second album came out. Because in those days, they released albums like every 6 months,
Right.
Second album comes out in May. I had front row seats for that. I saw him there, So you can become a fanboy when these things happen because like these guys matter to you. Like they matter to your DNA.
Yeah.
I saw Hendrix at the Garden, and he was terrible that night, and there was a riot, and he walked off after like 7 songs, and I'm like, that's Jimi Hendrix, And then I saw him again a year later at the Fillmore when he played Band of Gypsies. I had 10th row center seat for that. That was one of the greatest nights of my life. watching Jimmy that night was probably the greatest single night of guitar playing I've ever witnessed in my life. But again, these things, Cassius, were not necessarily special. They were every week.
Right. At that point in time.
Every week. You
that
could go insane. To the Fillmore and you could see Crosby, Stills and Nash. You could see The Who play for a week. You could see the Grateful Dead. I saw the Dead 27 times.
Wow.
When Pigpen was alive, if you're a Deadhead, right? Jerry Garcia gave me a tab of acid at the Fillmore East during one of their shows. Does it really get any more official than that?
How strong is his acid?
Well, the story with the acid is that I brought my own acid and dropped the tablet. I was front row. And before the band came on, I went, "Oh my God, I can't find the acid!" And the usher comes down and makes everybody get up, and they're on the floor looking for the acid. Only at the Fillmore East.
Oh my God!
Would this happen? So everyone's looking on the floor and they can't find it. And the band walks out, and he walks over to Jerry and goes, bah, 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 bah. Jerry reaches in his pocket, and hands him something, and he gives it to me. Look, I was taking so much drugs at that time; it was hard to tell you if it was stronger or not stronger. But I would come home from Dead shows and say the next morning, how did I get home?
Right. I can imagine.
Show,
That's
but
insane.
Anyway, yeah. So as my wife is sick of hearing me tell these stories because they just come out and they're just unending and they're every week and it's everyone you ever want to see. And she goes, I'm so sick of, I said, yeah, you may be sick of hearing it, but 22-year-olds want to hear this shit. Like they just want to know what it was like to do this and only spend $1. When Zeppelin used to play in Central Park, it was $1 and $1.50. It was $1.50 to sit in the orchestra and $1 to sit upstairs at this skating rink.
Was it an outdoor venue?
Yeah, outdoor venue.
Completely outdoor.
Rink.
Wow.
Yeah, it's still there. The skating rink is still there. It's called.
And they used to play there
in the Schaefer Festival in the summertime.
Okay.
And everyone played there. I mean, I saw Ike Tina Turner there. I saw the band. I saw the Beach Boys. I saw like Janis Joplin and Hendrix and everybody you can imagine.
You name it.
The thing is that they're so loud. It didn't matter that you were in it because if you were just sitting outside smoking a joint, you were hearing it, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't even matter. So imagine being a hippie, 16, 17. And someone says, and you're at the fountain, which is Bethesda Fountain, where all the hippies used to meet, which is maybe 1,000 feet from the skating rink or 2,000 feet. Someone says, "Hey man, Zepp's going on in a half hour." And you go, "All right, I'll walk
I'll mosey over there.
You mosey over and you don't have a ticket to get in, but big fucking deal. You sit down on a picnic blanket and you smoke a joint and Zeppelin's playing, right over a fence. So It doesn't really matter. So, yeah, I love telling those stories because I know that you guys hear them and go, "Wow, what could that be like?"
I mean, I'm beside myself right now. It's crazy. And it really puts context too into like one of the greatest cultural centers in the world. Because I personally have never been to New York. I was just gearing up to make my first run there before the whole travel shut down. But just all the rich history, it makes a lot of sense why that was such a creative place, because it's almost like you couldn't avoid any of these things.
It still is electric. Where I'm talking to you from is my apartment on the Upper West Side.
Right.
I have lived in this apartment all my life. In fact, the room that I am talking to you from is my bedroom when I was 6 years old. Okay.
Wow.
I've been here in my house since 1958. And I'm looking out at my window and I'm seeing the Mega Billionaires Row towers from my apartment. I can see 432 Park Avenue. I can see 157 West 57th Street. I can see 111. These were all the apartments are going for 50, 60, 70, 100, $200 million.
Smokes.
It's crazy.
That's
I try to think about this. Let me ask you this question, Cassius. When you listen to music, how do you listen to music now? Tell me. How do you listen to music?
Honestly,
headphone, stereo, how do you listen to music?
I would say mostly through my phone. I recently invested in a good Bluetooth speaker to bring the music to life, but usually through my computer, phone. But actually, I do a lot of YouTube watching. I like the live clips, and sometimes I'll even settle for the studio version so I can hear it on the TV.
Okay.
What about you?
Well, as a child of the 60s, we all had stereos.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first stereo I seriously bought in 1967, I paid about $600 for, $700. And back in 1967, if you were the richest guy on earth and you wanted to buy the most expensive stereo system you could buy on earth, the most you could spend in 1967 is about $8,000. And that bought you a Macintosh or a Marantz amps and a Thorens turntable and a pair of clip-shorn speakers and maybe a Macintosh or Marantz tuner, which is an FM radio, and maybe $6-7 grand. You got the best stereo you could buy. Well, I happen to be an audiophile. I happen to write for an audiophile magazine. I happen to be a former audiophile salesman, and I happen to go to audiophile conventions. And I happen to follow the entire high-end audio business intensely. And I've watched it evolve over the last 50 years. And this is what I can tell you today. If you wanted to buy the best stereo system you could buy, and it's a stereo, mind you, it's not surround sound, and it has nothing to do with television, and it has nothing to do with being in a studio. This is just you being one rich motherfucker, and you just want the best stereo system, and you have the money.
To just blow.
Okay, so in 1967, the most money you could spend on a turntable for your home stereo was about $250. That's the most you could have spent.
Wow.
The most expensive turntable currently is the Tech Dash Zero at $450,000. Okay,
a bit of a difference.
without a tone arm. You have to buy a tone arm. So
Without
the tone arm, so the tone arm will cost you. The best tone arm you can buy is the SAT. It's about $50,000, and the best cartridge you could buy, the best needle you can buy back then was about $70. Today is $16,000. Okay. The best speaker cable back in the day was just zipcord that you got from the hardware store. Right. The most expensive speaker cable that I know of today is MIT's. It was $80,000 for
a cable,
20-foot pair. Yeah. The most expensive speaker system for the home is the Wilson Chronosonic, which is with subwoofers $950,000.
Oh my!
The most expensive amplifiers you could buy for your home stereo system are a pair of Dan D'Agostino's Momentums, $300,000 for the pair. The point being is we live in a crazy freaking world.
Yeah.
Just remember this. The most expensive apartment in New York in 1968 was $350,000. The most expensive apartment in New York today is $238 million for an apartment. Okay. So we're talking, so if you live as long as I've lived, the relative levels of luxury are crazy. And by the way, the stuff sounds really good, but at what point is it going to sound good? Now, my home stereo system, I know these manufacturers, right? They're friends of mine. So I have a home system that retails for about $130,000. My turntable and its phono stage retail for about $40,000.
Man.
And my amplifier retails for about $10,000, and the cables retail for about $30,000. And I pay 20 cents on the dollar because I know these guys. All right. So maybe I pay $20,000 for my system.
That's really good.
Point is, I have a great system. People come over and they go, wow, it's amazing. And you, if you ever come to New York City, you will come over. And
I would love to.
And I will say to you, Cassius, here, let me school you on something. Okay. So keep this in mind. In 1968, the most expensive watch you could buy was a Patek. You've heard of Patek Philippe watches,
definitely.
Right?
Very big now.
Yeah, but back then, the most expensive Patek was about $8,000. You know what the most expensive Patek is today? $2.5 million.
Whoa.
The most expensive Richard Mille, $2.5 million. The most expensive A. Lange, $2.5 million. The most expensive Grubel 4C, you've never even heard of Grubel 4C.
No, I haven't.
Know who they are. Probably $2 million. The most expensive Romain Gaultier, you've never heard of Romain Gaultier, right? Okay. Probably the most expensive Romain Gaultier is about $1.5 million. I know these guys. I mean, I know them. Wow. Would I own it? No. Because my watches cost like a grand, you know, they keep time but whatever. Here's the point. In 1968, there was one billionaire. There's 2,300 billionaires now. Well, when you got 2,300 billionaires, you need someone to come up with something to separate them from their money, don't you? So
yes, there needs to be some foundation or something.
Ergo, people come up with crazy shit. So the most expensive production car in the world, meaning an assembly line production car, not a one-off.
Right.
A Bugatti, $3 million. Right. So if you're Jay-Z and you want to, forget,
which I think
Maybach.
He does have it actually.
Yeah. Well, he's got probably a Maybach, which is $600,000. I can tell you this: Jay-Z has a Richard Mille watch that's $2.5 million because I know the guy that sold it to him.
How do you know these guys in the watch business? Is that just because you said you don't really collect watches?
I don't. Well, I'm a watch. Here's what I am. I'm an observer of many things. And I'm an observer of high-end audio. I'm an observer of watches. I'm an observer of guitars.
Yeah.
And like the stuff that I love, I know a lot about.
For sure.
And so I know a lot about watches because I love watches. I think watches are incredible. Do I think that it's insane? Of course I think it's insane. My father was a jewelry salesman. Right?
Okay.
And when I was 10 years old, I think I said to my father, "What's the most expensive watch?" This is like 1962. I think he said Patek or something.
Right.
And I said, "What do you wear?" And he goes, "Timex." And he's the jewelry salesman. And I go, "What's that?" And he goes, $10. And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because it works." So when I play guitar on stage and I tour around the world, I play Epiphone guitars. They list for $399. They're great guitars. I don't take out my $10,000, $20,000, $60,000 vintage Gibsons or anything. I take out $300 guitars. Why? Because they're good.
Okay.
And they're tools. They're tools, man. They're
that was a
tools.
question I was actually going to ask you, is that in terms of the signature sound, I was going to say, do you feel like it's more so the person or more so the instrument or the marriage? But you're saying that you can make it on a $300 guitar, your sound.
Well, that's a very good question. So let me answer this question for you like this. Leslie West, B.B. King, Carlos Santana, Jimi Hendrix, they're all going to sound like themselves no matter what they play because it's here. Steve Vai.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're not inspired by a particular brand guitar or you're not inspired by a particular amplifier or a particular pedal because they give you inspiration to practice more.
Right.
But the better you are as a player, the more it's in the fingers.
It's in the fingers. Okay.
Yeah. So when you listen to, who's your favorite guitar player? Let me ask you that.
Oh man, that's a really tough one. I think maybe Slash.
Okay.
Just because I feel like he really can cover every single angle that I could really think of.
Okay. Are you immersed in guitar players or just kind of have a rough, you know some of them a little bit?
No, I'd say I'm immersed. Like I'm a big Ace Frehley guy.
Okay. So here's when people say to me, who are the three most influential guitar players in the United States? Like who's the ones who've created more desire to become rock stars than anybody else? This is what I'll say. I'll say the three guitar players who probably created more of a desire for a musician to become a rock star were Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen, and Ace Frehley. Totally. Ace Frehley doesn't come close to Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix on one level, but his image and his performance style and his effect on the dreamscape of hundreds of thousands of kids has probably been more impactful than many other guitar players. And by the way, there's plenty of great players that may be technically better than him. What I'm just saying is I believe that Ace's thing has been more responsible for more kids wanting to go out and buying a guitar and becoming a guitar hero. Okay.
I would agree with that.
For me, it was because I'm older. For me, growing up at the Fillmore East and seeing all these great players every night, for me, it was Mike Bloomfield from the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. He was the first guitar player that blew me away. Okay. Knocked me on my ass. For me, it was Jimi Hendrix. For me, it was Jimmy Page.
Right.
For me, it was Jeff Beck because I used to see him. I saw Rod Stewart's first show in New York with Jeff Beck. And
really?
Rod Stewart was so scared he wouldn't say, he was hiding behind the PA system. It's this famous story. Jeff Beck had to kick him in the ass and to get him out.
Because there were so many people?
No, he was just terrified. He didn't want to come out from behind the PA.
Because that was his first show in New York.
His first show with Jeff Beck. And, with the Jeff Beck group in Truth when the album came out in 1968. So, so when you would go see Jeff Beck or you would go see Carlos Santana or B.B. King or Johnny Winter or any of those guys, you'd see him at night. And I would come home at 4:00 in the morning and I put a guitar on, stand in front of a mirror, and pretend I was them. You know, and that was how my dream. So people say to me, well, you're such a Beatles fanatic. Why don't you play Beatles songs? And that's a very good question, because I am not only a Beatles fanatic, I write a Beatles column and I'm considered a Beatleologist.
Right.
I never cared about sounding like them. I just didn't, for whatever reason. I can't explain why. So even though they hit when I was 11 years old and, oh my God, they changed my life and everything was great, I didn't necessarily care about playing like that.
Like them.
It wasn't
right.
until I heard the blues. And then I got bitten by the blues bug. And the minute I got bitten by the blues bug, which was Mike Bloomfield from Paul Butterfield Blues Band, Eric Clapton, one of the most famous albums in the world, which is the John Mayall Blues Breakers record. If you've never heard it or you don't understand, I can guarantee you ask Slash, you ask Joe Bonamassa, you ask any of these guys, what's the album that made you want to become what you are? They will tell you either Mike Bloomfield's playing on Paul Butterfield's Blues Band or Clapton's playing on the Blues Breakers. Clapton was 19. He was 19.
He was 19. Wow.
And I don't think he's ever played better.
Ooh.
I think he peaked on that record. And that
That's
was his first
huge.
album. Yeah. And it's generally accepted, by the way. It's generally accepted amongst guitar players my age. When asked about what guitar tone drove you crazy and made you want to play, you go, I heard Clapton's Blues Breakers record. I went, oh my God, right? It just was, he's the first guy to marry a Gibson Les Paul and an overdriven Marshall amplifier. So that he had his sound. Jimi Hendrix, he's the first guy to marry a Marshall amp with a Stratocaster turned up to 10. So he spoke a new language. So you talk about, when you want to talk about innovators, it's guys who created new languages on the instrument. You know, those guys created new languages on the instrument. So that's why it matters to me. So if you were to ask Slash or Morello, they'd all say, Morello will tell you Jimmy Page, flat out. He'll go Jimmy Page's guitar tone. You know, now I saw Zeppelin many, many, many times, and they got worse as time went on. That was the real story about Zeppelin, was drugs and alcohol had its effect on Jimmy. Right. So as the years went by, they deteriorated. So 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, they were amongst the greatest bands you would ever want to see live. Like your just mouth would fall open. You'd watch John Bonham play drums. You just... You know, your jaws would drop. Come 75, Robert's voice starts deteriorating a bit, and Jimmy's playing starts to deteriorate. Right. There's plenty of stuff online to prove it. I don't have to. I'm not saying this with any glee. Trust me.
It's just a fact. Like after Physical Graffiti.
Yeah. And then by 77, on their last tour, how's this? You want to know something crazy? So here we are in 1977. Twist is one of the biggest bar bands in the tri-state area, and a friend of ours is a ticket broker, and he gave us 4 tickets to give away at one of our shows. You know, like, you know, come tonight and win 4 tickets. We couldn't give tickets away to Zeppelin in 77 because nobody wanted to see them. Like, if you were a kid in Long Island and you wanted to hear Zeppelin, you'd go see Zebra, this band Zebra, or you go see Rat Race Choir, because they did Zepp better than Zepp.
Head to toe, they do all the Zeppelin songs?
Yeah. And they were phenomenal bands. And you go, why would I waste my time seeing this band that can't play Zeppelin songs? Zeppelin. So we couldn't give tickets away. So I had 4 tickets to see Zepp at the Garden, and I couldn't give them away. That's impossible to even picture. Yeah, comprehend. But I went. I went with some friends, and we're all sitting there bored to death. I swear to God. I spent the 3 hours watching John Bonham play guitar because I watched him play drums because I couldn't listen to this. But this is a byproduct of my age. You know, look, Steve Vai grew up on Long Island. Steve Vai used to sneak into clubs to see Twisted Sister with Mike Portnoy.
Oh, wow.
You know, he's 8 years younger than me. And Mike became our drummer. And then we played with Steve Vai 4 years ago. I reminded Steve when I booked him for my show. I'm having him on in a couple of weeks. Nice. And I said, Steve, we played at the Guitar Unseen Guitar Expo in 2016 in France. And he goes, oh, yeah. So he was standing on the side of the stage watching our whole set. And he's standing there and he's going like this to me. And I'm going, Steve Vai? Steve Vai? Steve Vai is one of the greatest guitar players on the planet Earth, you know? But here's the thing. He respected the bands that made him do what he wanted to do. And that's really the point. It's like I could go see the bands that made me want to be what I want to be. I would forever be respectful and forever grateful because they're the ones that gave me my dream. And I'm just kind of curious, forgetting COVID and this last year sucking, how many shows have you seen live in your life?
Personally, I've got to see close to 100. I've been very, very lucky to photograph many shows, many festivals. And yeah, there was a time where even out here in Western Canada, where I'm not in a market with massive concert reach, I was seeing a show almost every week for about a year and a half.
And what was your first show?
My first show ever was Kiss.
And how was it?
It was fantastic. It was a massive outdoor festival in Eastern Canada in Halifax, and it was the first time they ever came there. So the crowd was it was like 200,000 people, like in this massive field, and it was amazing. You know, I'm curious what your first show was actually.
Well, the first show that wasn't the Weavers in Carnegie Hall in 1963 was the Animals in 1966, the song House of the Rising Sun.
Totally.
And they played in New York City on August 6th. Why is that an important date for you? You should know why it's an important date. Because the next day, Chaz Chandler went to the Cafe Wah, saw Jimi Hendrix and signed Jimi Hendrix and brought him to England.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So that was the reason why I know that date really well, because the day after they played the Schaefer Festival, which is the show that I saw.
Right.
And I was 14.
Central Park.
I just turned 15. Yeah. I just turned 15. So I go to that show, and the next day he goes down to the Cafe Wah, which is owned by a guy named Manny Roth, who was David Lee Roth's uncle. Oh, by the way.
Nice.
Yeah. And Jimmy was in a house band called Jimmy James and the Blue Flames. Mm-hmm. In case you don't know.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I had managed a local band called Glass Stairway and got them a gig at the Cafe Wah. So they were playing at the Wah the night that Chaz Chandler came down and signed Jimi Hendrix. And my friend Freddie Rivera, who's the drummer of the Glass Stairway, tells me the story recently that he said, the day that Chaz Chandler came down, I was there. I saw Chaz sitting in the corner with Jimmy. So I went, wow, that's kind of
he witnessed it happening.
He witnessed it happening. He witnessed the conversation between Jimmy and Chaz Chandler, which is kind of cool.
Smokes,
so anyway,
man.
That was the Animals at the Schaefer Festival, and those tickets were $1. The following year, Easter Sunday, 1967, a local DJ named Murray the K had what is known as the Music in the Fifth Dimension rock extravaganza at the RKO Theater. And it was 10 bands, 10 artists played 9 times a day, every hour and a half, 9 times a day. And the opening bands were Cream and The Who. They opened. It was the first time they were in the United States. They opened for the Young Rascals and Wilson Pickett, Mitch Wright and the Detroit Wheels. So I go to one of the afternoon matinee shows, and Cream comes on and does 2 songs, NSU and I Feel Free. And then The Who came on and did I Can't Explain in My Generation. And the Young Rascals had the #1 song in the country that week, Groovin'. So they were headlining the show. In fact, Gene Cornish, the guitar player for the Young Rascals, told me a story. He said that in 1967, they got a call. Their manager got a call from Murray the K and said, "I'm not selling any tickets to these shows. I got 63 shows in 7 days." He goes,
"Oh my God!"
And no one's buying tickets, and I need the Young Rascals to headline because they have the #1 song in the country. And he's a powerful DJ, so this is important. Mm-hmm. So the manager said, "Well, how much can you pay him?" He said, "I can't pay him, but I'll buy him lunch every day." So they did it for lunch.
They did it for lunch.
For lunch every day. Think about how kind of sounds like prehistoric, doesn't it?
$1 for a ticket and your pay is a sandwich. I mean, these are simpler times though, because it's about the love of music, not superficial crap. Like I grew up in the age of StubHub, paying $200 to sit in the nosebleeds at Metallica. So like this is an era that I would be more comfortable in.
Well, I guess who wouldn't be?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Who wouldn't be? But the thing is, in those days, we didn't think it was particularly amazing.
Right.
It was just the way it was. So the Murray the K Easter show in 1967 was pretty eye-opening. But then in 1968, I'm in my chemistry class. You know who Johnny Winter is? You know the guitar player Johnny Winter?
Yeah.
Okay, he's super famous. Well, he had just been signed to the most expensive record deal in the history of the music industry at that point. He had just signed a deal. And, oh God, I was like, and a kid in my chemistry class walks up to me and he goes, "Hey man, you ever been to the Fillmore East?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, my brother just signed Johnny Winter. I said, I read that story in Rolling Stone magazine. Is your brother Steve Paul? He goes, yeah. He goes, that's my brother. I'm Ricky Paul. He goes, you want to be my guest at the Fillmore? That's how I got to the Fillmore the first time.
Wow.
So it was Terry Reid, who you'd probably never heard of, but he was the original singer for Led Zeppelin.
Okay, I didn't know him. No.
Who turned him down.
Right.
He turned him down. A blues singer from England, great blues artist. Terry Reid opened. Johnny Winter was second on the bill, and B.B. King was the headliner.
Wow.
So that was the first time at the Fillmore, which then I said, wow, I want to come back to the Fillmore next week. So the next week it was Canned Heat and Iron Butterfly and the Youngbloods. And you probably don't know who the Youngbloods are.
I don't know them.
They had a big hit which went like, come on, people now, smile on me, brother, everybody get together, come and love one another right now. You know that song.
I
right?
definitely know that.
Okay, so that was the Youngbloods' biggest hit, right, at the time.
But I know that from Nirvana, actually, which is strange.
Okay, well, it's not particularly, because most of the blues songs I learned from white blues artists who, reading them from black blues artists who I eventually learned from.
This is true.
So, everything has inspirational points to it, right? And all that matters is that you love the artist, you love the song, and then if you're interested in it, you go back in history and find other versions. That's really what musicologists do, right? They just
keep retracing and sort of connecting the dots.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Beatles started out as a rock and roll cover band. They did Chuck Berry, they did Motown. I mean, that's what they did. And Twisted Sisters, we were a bar band and we played, we did music of our era. That was David Bowie and we did Zeppelin and all that stuff. We started out as a glam. I'll tell you an artist that had an enormous impact on me.
Okay.
Really big impact on me. So you go through the whole hippie period, and you got the Hendrixes and the Becks and the Claptons and and all of that wonderful era. Then Bowie comes on the scene with Ziggy Stardust.
Right.
And I was 20 years old, and I went crazy.
Of course.
I went crazy. I went nuts. I just went nuts. I was like, wow. So Mick Ronson, his guitar player, became my I idolized Mick Ronson.
Right.
And I wanted to look like Mick Ronson. So I went from looking like a Grateful Dead hippie Allman Brothers guy. That was originally my image. And I cut my hair off, dyed it blonde to be like him. And that's when Twisted started. So Bowie had an enormous impact.
So that was a big influence on the iconic Twisted Sister look, because I'm sure a lot of people wonder where that came from.
Yeah, it was the glam era was the glam era.
Right.
So look, let me ask you this question. What do you know about the New York Dolls, one way or another, good, bad, or indifferent? I don't care. You don't have to say anything to be hip. Just kind of curious. Do the Dolls' existence matter to you in any way, shape, or form?
For me personally, yes. Yeah. Because like I said, I grew up on the Kiss stuff, and reading the Kiss like biographies and stuff, I really got hit with how big of an impact they had on them.
Okay. So here's the story. Here's the real story.
I need the real story.
Here's the real story. The real story is that the Dolls, I knew these guys. I mean, they were like local musicians, and they weren't good. If you come from an era of Hendrix and Zeppelin and Santana and Zappa and really great, fantastic artists, and then a year goes by, the Fillmore shuts, and then New York creates the Dolls, you go, that's where society wound up with the Doll. Like that was how we evolved into that. So I knew Johnny, but more so than that, my high school friends were very close to them. So they said, you got to go and see them at the Mercer Art Center. They're like playing every week. So, I was a Grateful Dead hippie who transferred into a Bowie glam fanatic with Martha Hoople and Lou Reed and all that.
Yeah.
And I said, I got to go see the Dolls because they're supposed to be great. I walk in to the Mercer Art Center and I see a band that looks amazing and can't play their fucking way out of a paper bag. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like I'm sitting there, why am I practicing? I mean,
because these guys are on stage with the show.
And like, they're like, yeah, but they just want. So and Gene and Paul had the same thing. They saw him and went, really? Like, we both said we could do better.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
I didn't realize that.
I just read something recently about Gene and Paul's reaction was exactly the same as mine, which was, Really? Like, they never maybe said anything negative. I walked out of the first Dolls show, and a record executive walked up to me. I will never forget this. He said, "What do you think of the band?" And I think he was thinking about signing the band. And I thought to myself, gee, I'm being asked by a guy in a suit my opinion of an artist. I've never been asked that question in my life. I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So he goes, "You just saw the show?" I said, "Yeah." So what'd you think? I said, "They look great. If they can never learn how to play, don't make a lot of money." That was my line. If they learn how to play, because they couldn't play. Now, you say that to Dolls fans. "Oh, you suck." In fact, Syl just died, and I wrote a beautiful thing because I wrote a beautiful thing for him because I knew his spirit was. His spirit was the right spirit. But, Cassius, if you're a musician in a band, you tend to be predatory and you tend to be like, fuck you, I can blow you off the stage. Like, if you're really worth anything, that's how you think. Anyone who tells me it's like a kumbaya world and you're wishing the best for everybody, fuck you. It's like, you know what? It's like it's a dog-eat-dog world. You go out on stage and I want to blow you away. And if you blow me away, that's cool too, because that means that people got their money's worth.
That's the spirit of it.
I don't care who blows away who. If you're that good and you can blow me away because the kids down there will be blown away.
Right.
So Twisted's attitude is blow us away, and no one ever did. That ain't gonna happen. But the point being is, it's a predatory mentality. I didn't go to see the Dolls and go, "Oh my God." Now, I will tell you this: when I was seeing Zeppelin and seeing Hendrix and seeing the Allman Brothers and seeing the Dead, I wasn't at the level where I'm going, I'm going to put a band together and blow these guys away. I was at that, oh my God, I'm witnessing the greatest artist in the world, Like,
you were like Steve Vai at the corner of the stage.
Same thing. Just like, yes, sir. But there's something happened. Something happened when I was 20 years old. Something happened. And part of it is I went completely straight. I stopped doing drugs, completely stopped dealing, and went completely straight, and then changed my life around 100%. And not for any reason that's religious or anything. I just woke up one morning and went, you know what? Enough is enough. I've done it, been there, done that. Don't need to do it again. Okay.
Interesting.
And so when I went to see them, I was just, at that point, I was more evolved in my head going, well, if that's going to be my target, I got to do better than that.
Right.
So when I joined the band that became Twisted Sister, those guys, the original guys, none of whom are in the band that they were all seasoned players. They were real players. I mean, the guitar player could play all the Steve Howe stuff. The drummer was a Buddy Rich trained kind of jazz drummer. Okay. The bass player was amazing. The singer was really good, and we had a copy band. And back in those days, you know how often you can work back in those days? You ready for some sick numbers? You ready?
How often?
Okay, here's sick. Band comes up to me, goes, "Hey, JJ, I want you to come see my band." I go, "Well, how often have you guys played?" "We've been together 2 years." "Well, how many shows have you done?" "We've done about 50 shows." I said, "Really?" "Well, when you get to 500, let me know." Never get to 500. Okay, so let's take my calculator out. Okay, Twisted Sister played 5 shows a night, 6 days a week. So that's 30 shows. That's 30 performances a week.
5 shows a night.
Yeah, 5 shows a night. Right. From the very first day we started working in the bars. So that's 30 shows a week times 52. So in 1 year, I've done 1,560 performances. So in the first 2 years of the band, I was at 3,000 shows.
Wow.
Okay. By the time D joined, we were at 3,000 shows. So by the time we got a record deal, we were at 7,000 or 7,500 performances. So when people talk to me about why is Twisted Sister so good, I'd say because if we weren't really good after 7,500 shows, then it was time to pack it in.
You would have a problem for sure.
Problem. So I talk about this in my book. I talk about the excellence of the boredom of excellence. You keep doing it and you keep doing it and you do it and you refine it and you refine it and you refine it. You get better and you get better and you get better. And that's how Twisted got great, because we did it thousands of times. And you ask Ted Nugent, thousands of times, Jay Giles, thousands of times, AC/DC, thousands of times. The best bands have done it thousands of times. And how were we in the early days? Probably not good. Probably sucked. I don't have a video of it, but I'm sure we were okay. Not great.
But you refined it.
Well, we refined it and fired everybody until the band that you made it, which was the 14th version. That's the 14th version of the band that made it.
The 14th version.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh, just thinking of this whole thing, you're just blowing my mind right now, JJ. I couldn't be,
Am I being too much? I hate being that. Am I overburdening you with verbal stuff?
Absolutely not. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. This is all valuable knowledge that I really appreciate. Another thing I wanted to know before we wrap up was just about the impact of the music videos on MTV. Just talk to me about what it was like to be in Twisted Sister around that era.
Here's what I'll tell you. I was 33 when the band hit it really big, and I'm glad I wasn't 23. Because at 33, I could handle what I knew was going to come, which was if it fell apart, I wasn't going to fall apart. But at 23, you can't. You believe the hype. I never believed the hype. I never believed I was great. I never believed we were great. The minute we would come home from tour, I would go into the school playground by my house I would come home after being on the road 6 months, 9 months, whatever, biggest shows, whatever, biggest album sales, were crazy radio videos. I come back to the city where nobody knows me other than my name, John, on the West Side. No one calls me JJ. No one's allowed to even ever call me that, ever.
In the West Side.
Where I live, I'm John. And in fact, the really old school guys call me by my real last name, which is Segal. They'll go, yo, Segal, what's up? So I would come home, grab a baseball bat and a ball, go to the yard around the corner and start hitting the bat against the wall. Because that's the only way I could get my brain back into reality. All this bullshit. So what it was like, well, I wasn't high, so I remember it really well. I was never stoned. Never bought into anything. I got invited to plenty of parties, never went to them because I said, why would I go? Because a year from now, if my record isn't hot, you're not going to invite me back anyway. So what the hell difference does that make? So I avoided I'm unusual that way. I just never, ever, I have my close friends and the ones I grew up with, and that's all I care about. The rest of it's all kind of nonsensical. Everyone gives you the lines of bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. They'll tell you this crap. I never bought into it. So it was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I knew fundamentally when we did the Iron Maiden tour through Canada, it was one of the most fun tours of my life. I mean, people who've seen the Iron Maiden Twisted shows that talk about the legend. Not only that, but that Canada and Sweden per capita have the most record sales of Twisted Sister.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the Canada, the ratio of album sales, US to Canada, is 10-1. So if you sell 1 million records in the United States, you sell 100,000 in Canada. Okay. If you sell 2 million records in the United States, you sell 200,000 in Canada. When we had done 2 million and Stay Hungry, we had done 600,000 in Canada. I mean, Canada went ape shit. And that tour we did that went from Halifax to Vancouver was one of the greatest times of my life. And Twisted maintains a very, very, very strong presence in the history of 80s metal in Canada. You have
very much so.
You have a radio guy named Richard Serrett. Do you know who he is?
I don't know him.
He's a Canadian radio broadcaster. He has a thing called Conspiracy Radio, which is like fun shit at night about guys, who land on the moon and,
right.
We got every conspiracy you can. But I listened to his show because it's a wacky show. And one day I wanted to comment and I figured, does he know me? And I email him. I go, this is JJ French. You probably don't know me. He goes, are you kidding me? I saw you in blah, blah, blah. So
what?
It was a great time. However, the drag was that when it fell apart really quick and it was startlingly fast. And if it wasn't for the fact that the band split up and came back bigger than it ever did, because we released the Christmas record, which became a big hit. We wound up headlining gigantic festivals around the world. Had we not come back, it would have been a sad footnote to our history. But the fact that the band came back in 2000, and we came back because of 9/11. We did a benefit in New York City for the Widows and Orphans Fund, the New York City Police and Fire Department, because trust me, you live in New York City at 9/11, you knew somebody who died in that building, in those buildings. You just knew. Or a friend of yours knew someone.
An unavoidable sort of tragedy.
Unavoidable. I mean, unavoidable, man. You live in New York City. You saw the buildings go down. You know someone who died. So we did a benefit, and the word got out, and we go back to Europe, and all of a sudden we have an amazing 14-year reunion, selling records, making the Christmas record, everybody becoming friends again. it was really wonderful that we came back. So I'm really grateful that we came back, and it gave us a springboard. So it allows me to do my thing, which is I have a book coming out called Twisted Business. That'll be out this summer. I have my podcast. D has his House of Hair, and he's always doing projects. Mark has a thing called Area 22. This allowed us to have a life. And sadly, AJ died, in 2015, our drummer, which was
rest in peace.
Tragedy. Mike Portnoy turned out to be, what can I say about Mike Portnoy? Besides being a phenomenal drummer, just one of the sweetest guys in the world to help us get over it. And we have a career. So, Cassius, my friend, we could go on for days.
I know. I know.
Do you have any other question you want to ask? Anything?
Yeah, I had one more formal question I wanted to ask you, but first, just thank you again so much for this insight. I'm, again, mind blown here, trying to keep my jaw shut. I just wanted to know, your reaction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which just released some new inductees.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on it? Because I know Dee Snider is not happy with it. He had some pretty.
I'm not happy with it. I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame years ago and thought it was the worst curated piece of shit I'd ever seen. I didn't understand it. Like I said to myself, here's what I said to myself. I'm a New Yorker, right? So I should understand the super hip New York downtown, kind of like why Patti Smith and the look, screw that. The fact of the matter is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's in Cleveland. Cleveland's in the Midwest. How do you not have Kansas? How do you not have REO Speedwagon? How do you not have Bob's? How do you not have the bands that kept fucking rock and roll alive in the 80s?
Seriously.
How do you not have Priest? How do you not have Maiden? How do you not have the artists that kept this whole fucking business alive? Because it was so hip for you to say we sucked. It was so hip to go, the 80s sucked. I got news for you all. The 80s not only didn't suck, but the 80s, in terms of the kids around the world, South America, Europe, Japan, the Far East, India, they fill stadiums today because of the music that we created back then. And if that music is that damn important, then why the hell do we not have the respect of being acknowledged by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? That's what annoys me. It's not that the Beatles shouldn't be. Of course they should be there. Of course a lot of these acts should be there, but so should about 30 or 40 other acts that are actually responsible for the propagation and the continuation of the kind of music that we grew up, that I played, and that inspired you. And until that's recognized, I don't respect that, because I just think it's completely misguided and totally elitist and really fucked up. So there's my opinion about the Rock.
There you go. And that's I could not agree more, JJ. And again, thank you so much for this. The podcast, the JJ French Connection Beyond the Music, is available on Podcast One. I highly recommend it, folks. And thank you so much for your time again.
Well, I'm glad I've got your name right, Cassius.
Yes, thank you.
You're also named after a hero of mine and one of the greatest fighters on the planet. So thank you for having me. And it's also on Apple, by the way. It's on Apple and it's on Spotify.
Yes.
And thanks to all the fans and all the people that listen to your podcast, because you have a huge podcast. You have a huge coverage. So I can't tell you how grateful I am that you thought enough of me to have me on yours.
Oh my goodness, it's an absolute honor. And I'll keep in touch and pass along the finished product.
And you know what? You let me know when you come to New York, my friend, and I will. I'll show you Manhattan the way only a Manhattan guy can show you Manhattan.
I would love that. It may not be that long, depending where things are going. So I will keep that in mind.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Your people contact my people.
Yeah,
okay,
we'll
Cassius?
talk. Okay.
All right, man.
Thanks, JJ. Take care.
Buddy.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
And there you have it. My exclusive podcast with JJ French, founding guitar player of Twisted Sister. The podcast is the JJ French Connection Beyond the Music. Go check it out on Podcast One and wherever podcasts are available. The Cassius Morris Show comes to you every single week, twice per week on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you enjoy what you just saw, please hit that subscribe button wherever you're currently tuned in. And also leave a comment or review. I definitely want to know what you think of the content that I continue to put out, and I will be making adjustments based on the feedback that I get. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the show. Until next time, this is Cassius Morris saying, rock on.